Hey guys, it's Alex, and I am here with my weekly book review. The last book I finished was a young adult contemporary novel that I was really excited to read and had been on my TBR for a while, and that is The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith. This book centers around Eden, who's a 14-year-old who was raped by her older brother's best friend. It follows 4 years of her life from her freshman year to her senior year in high school, as she spirals downwards, trying to cope with the aftermath of the rape all on her own. Because this book deals so heavily with rape, I'm going to give a trigger warning right now that I will be discussing rape and its effects, so if you don't want to hear about that, I would click off just because it is a major part of this book review and a major part of this book. I was really excited to read this book. I had heard amazing things from a variety of people, and it sounded really good. I did rate it 4 stars, so I thought it was a fantastic book. It wasn't necessarily everything that I wanted it to be, but I still thought it was a really good book. Although a really good book that had a few flaws. Parts of this I loved to pieces. Eden's running and freezing and acting out, and her constant terror but need to pretend that she's not afraid, so she acts in ways that she is brave, that she's not scared of anything, that she's not emotionally attached to anything, even when she is. I very much related to that. I was fascinated by her character. I identified probably too much with her character. That was what made the book for me. Like, nothing else really mattered to me when I was reading this. It could have had a terrible plot, terrible writing, terrible story, and I still would have rated this highly just because of how much I identified with Eden, and I was completely sucked into her arc throughout the story. I didn't read this all in one sitting because I got interrupted with about 100 pages left, but I did finish it in one day, and I would have read it in one sitting if I'd had another hour. I couldn't look away. Like, even when I had to take a few hours of a break to hang out with my boyfriend, I was just completely enthralled and still continuing to think about this book as we were hanging out. I needed to know how it ended. Like, very quickly into reading this book, I knew this was going to be a book that I binge read in one sitting because I needed to know her arc. I needed to know how it ended. I needed the complete arc. Eden's relationship at the beginning of the book with Josh was my favorite of all her relationships. I thought it was incredibly well written and incredibly realistic. The way she acted and the way she treated him, which wasn't necessarily good most of the time. It was very interesting, and that was also something I identified very strongly with. She was constantly pulling him in and pushing him away, and it really touched me, in a way I wasn't expecting it to touch me. This book made me cry a lot, and after I finished it, I just cried for about 30 minutes, even though it was 3 o'clock in the morning. It was so good and so worth reading. However, I did have a few critiques of this book, and I'm not sure if I would necessarily recommend it to other people to read. I will get into that more at the end, but I will say that I gave it 4 stars, and I could potentially see myself rereading this someday. At times, I thought it felt quite melodramatic. There was a lot of Eden finding boys who fell in love with her, and then her running away in tears while the boy was trying to grab her and hold on and talk to her. And this was a scene that happened numerous times with several different boys, and it's just how many times can you write that scene before it starts feeling a little bit ridiculous? This whole book kind of had that feel that it was just a little bit too much, and I would have liked it if it felt a little bit more grounded, but as I said, I identified so strongly with Eden that it didn't bother me so much, but it is the major point that kept this book from being 5 stars for me. It just needed a little bit less, I think. It needed to be a little bit calmer, a little bit less blasting at all times. The situations just seemed too much, just a little bit too melodramatic for my taste. There was a lot of slut-shaming in this book that was never critically discussed, and it was just sort of frowned upon in the sense that it was bullying and you shouldn't be mean to people, but never in the sense that you shouldn't shame people for having sex regardless of whether it's casual or not. And that made me very uncomfortable. I really didn't like that aspect of the book, and it felt like there was a line between like the good sex her best friend was having with her long-term boyfriend who she loved, and the bad sex of casual dating and just casual hookups in general. And I do understand that Eden was acting out and this was how she was coping in a very unhealthy way, but just in general, I got that feeling that that's what the book was saying overall, and it made me very uncomfortable. I wish there had been slightly more critical discussion on what slut-shaming is and why it's wrong, and not just that it's bad to insult someone, but why specifically slut is a bad word and why it is a slur. Overall, I did love this book. I gave it 4 stars. I will probably reread it, but I don't think someone who hadn't identified as much with this book as I did would love it as much as I did. I feel like because I related and identified with Eden so much that it sort of clouded the rest of the book for me. So I don't think it's a bad book by any means, but I can definitely see how plenty of people wouldn't enjoy this, particularly people who don't read a lot of YA. I'm not sure that I would recommend this book. I don't think I would ever tell someone not to read it, because I did love it, and I do think there's a lot to get out of this book, but I also think there's a lot of reasons why people would dislike it, and why it does have quite a few negative reviews on Goodreads. But overall, it was a 4-star great read for me, and I adored every second that I was reading this book. Please let me know down below what you guys thought of this book if you've read it. I'm very, very curious to hear other people's thoughts. As always, thank you for watching, thank you for commenting, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Bye!